I am fairly well known for saying what I think and being quite critical about things that I don't like on this channel. One of those things that I have been critical about is this, the TBS Lucid ESC. Now, if you don't know what it is, it's a new flight stack that is available from Team Black Sheep. And what I've been critical about is the new mount that it uses, which is called Gorilla Mount. Now, on a number of live streams, I've discussed this and I've shot my mouth off about this, but I haven't actually seen it for myself. So I thought it was time I put my money where my mouth is, and I've ordered it in. And today, what we're going to do is take a really close look at the TBS Lucid flight controller, the TBS Lucid ESC, and we're also going to take a look at a Source One frame kit as well that is designed to be used with the Gorilla Mount system. Now, there is no question that TBS are one of the oldest brands and most well known in FPV, and they have over the years made some really great products that have helped push FPV forward. But my criticism about this was what felt to be a move that really didn't seem to bring any benefits, and it's going to be interesting to see if I was right or if I got this one wrong. Now, before we get into it, I do just want to say that I actually bought these products. I was not sent them. I ordered them from Your FPV in the UK, and they very kindly sent them over to me. If you're interested in getting them, there will be a link to the TBS website as well as Your FPV website in the UK as well. I want to say a big thank you to Your FPV. They are a great supporter of the channel. Even though I bought these, they did send me some other stuff to take a look at as well. But this isn't a sponsored review, pay review, or anything like that. This is entirely my thoughts. So let's get on with it. Let's go down the rabbit hole and let's see what this is all about. Now, we're going to start with the flight controller and the ESC. We'll start with the FC first of all and then move over to the ESC in a minute. Now, there are two versions of the TBS Lucid flight controller available. There is the freestyle version and the pro version. This is the Pro. That comes with the MPU 6000 gyro. The freestyle version is exactly the same, apart from the fact instead of having the MPU 6000, it comes with the ICM 42688P gyro. That is what you're paying the $10 difference for. The ICM gyro version is $39.95. The MPU 6000 version is $49.95. Now, in the kit, when you get it open, inside you will find the flight controller itself. Let me just get into here to get everything out. There we go. So, we have the flight controller itself in the anti-static bag. We have an ESC cable. We have what appears to be a DJI-03 cable. That's what that looks like to me. Okay, we'll take a look at that more in a minute. We have 4 gummies and we have some screws. Now, looking at the controller in a bit more detail, we'll need to break into the anti-static bag. You can see that it is a 20 by 20 mountain flight controller. It features the AT32 main MCU, so it's not running an MCU by ST Microelectronics. This is the Pro version, which comes with the MPU 6000 gyros. It supports up to 4 motors. It has 2 BECs on board, a 9-volt BEC up to 2.5 amp and a 5-volt BEC up to 2 amp. It does come with the analog OSD chip pre-installed as standard, and it has 8 megs of black box onboard storage. It has 6 UARTs available as well, and it supports an input voltage range of 3 to 6S, and it's said to weigh 4.51 grams. Now, as you can see when you look at the board, everything is actually predominantly mounted on this side here. There is not a lot of connectors on this board with regards to plugging things in. You do have your ESC connector up there, and that looks to be a connector for that digital VTX connector. We'll look what the pinouts are on that in a minute, but that does look like a DJI style wired connector to me. On this side of the board, there really isn't a huge amount to show you. You do have a USB-C connector for connecting into, say, Betaflight. There is a button down there. You've got your analog OSD chip. There is an area over this side of the board that has been dedicated for mounting a Nano RX. That'll be a crossfire receiver that you can mount directly onto the board there as well. And then obviously if we spin it over to this side, you can see we've got our 2 BECs. You've got your coils either side. You've got your Arteri key IC in the middle, your AT32, and then you've got your pads located around the sides. Now, just looking at it under the microscope, first of all, we can see the pad assignment. So if we start over this side here, you've got your battery, your ground, your 9 volts, your ground, your TX1, RX1 and 5 volts. If we then flip around to this side here, you can see we've got ground, 9 volt. You've got a VTX pad there. The label's just above that cap. You've got your buzzer, your 5 volt, your TX8 and RX8. If we head around to this side here, you've got 5 volt ground, R7, T7, SDA and SCL, which means you've got I2C on here if you want to use it with a compass or GPS. Moving around to this side here, we've got 9 volt ground, cam, CC, LED ground and 5 volts. Now, just looking at the components on this side of the board, obviously we can see our Arteriki IC there, and we've got our coils for our voltage regulators, our buck regulators, our 9 volt and our 5 volt. We've then got our Winbond flash chip, which is the 8 megs of onboard storage. And then you do have those additional pads down the middle there, which go into this area down this side here if you did want to mount your Nano RX directly on board. And then if we look around this side of the board, there's not a great deal to show you, but you do have your AT7456E analog OSD chip. We've obviously here got our USB-C port, and then that is that digital connector for the likes of DJI-03 over here. Just looking on the TBS website, they do include a cable specifically for DJI-03 FPV, and that harness there is pinned directly for that. Looking around the quality of the manufacturing, everything looks really nice and clean and tidy. No complaints at all. All components look exactly where they should be, all on their spots, nothing tombstoning. All the soldering looks good as well. The quality of the board looks as good as anything else that I've seen there on the market. Really, no complaints whatsoever. Next, we're going to take a look at the TBS Lucid ESC. Now, this is what I've probably been more vocal about, and that is the fact that this ESC has a rather unusual mount. It is a new mount created by TBS called the Gorilla mount. Now, this is compatible with TBS frames, but there are adapters available as well to use it with other frames. I've got two here. We'll have a look at this a little bit more later on, but you can get a mount for this to fit a standard frame for 30 by 30 and 20 by 20 as well. Now, this ESC is a 6S 4-in-1. It is based on AM32 and supports up to 60 amps continuous and 70 amps burst. That is a high-rated ESC for the money, considering that you're only paying $55. Now, once I've worked out how to get myself into the TBS packaging, we will get everything out. Okay, there we go. That's it all there. So, included with it, as you can see, you have a pre-wired XT60 connector down to tinned ends which are ready to solder to the ESC. You have your ESC itself in the bag. They include some bolts and nuts for mounting. They include a capacitor, which is 35 volt 470 UF. You have the ESC, and you also have a mount for the flight controller as well. Now, it is worth understanding on this, and you'll need to see it probably for me to be able to explain this properly. But you do need a mount for your flight controller, because whereas the ESC is using its own Gorilla mount, as you can see there, the flight controller is not. The flight controller is still 20 by 20, and as a result of that, you actually need a mount for the ESC to mount the flight controller to. So instead of having your typical arrangement of your ESC posts coming through from your frame through the ESC through your flight controller, what you have on this is the option of Gorilla mount if the frame supports it, and if it doesn't, you would use one of the brackets I showed you earlier. But regardless of that, you then will still have a mounting bracket that fits on the top like that for your 20 by 20 flight controller to mount to. This then creates a sort of separately mounted system. So your ESC will be mounted to your frame, your flight controller to your ESC, and they remain all separate from the main posts of your frame, not like you would mount a normal flight stack. Now, the first thing you'll notice when you look at this ESC is the fact that all the FETs are mounted nicely in a line directly onto the motor pad outputs. Now, TBS have been able to do this because of the Gorilla Mount. Instead of having your post holes through where these FETs are here, they've now mounted them out to the side. On a traditional ESC like this AM32 ESC here, they actually end up having to move the FETs around, and then you normally have a track that runs out to this last motor point. If I just show you here, there is a shield on this one, but basically the internal pads, so the 4 in the middle, all have FETs directly on them, and then the pad on either corner has a FET that's mounted inboard here, and then you then have the track going around the post hole at the side. This can somewhat compromise design of the ESC in the sense of you have a thinner track going down to there, which can compromise the current carrying capacity, but it also means you have to make sure that you do have plenty of clearance around this corner here as well. You can't have that ESC track touching your frame mounting post. This ESC actually has a grounded hole for the mounting post, and you can see it's grounded all the way through as well. It's plated right down. But if I just show you on this side here, you can see that the track actually goes around the outside either side. This is what TBS are trying to avoid. So what they've done is created Gorilla Mount, moved the mounts out to the sides, and they've then been able to lay everything out nice and clean and tidy. Now, Trappy has said the main benefit of this design over a standard ESC is that you have symmetry in the design. All of the FETs are mounted at equal space to the motor outputs, which means each of the phases will all be loaded equally. You should also potentially get a benefit in thermal performance as well, because you're not constraining that end motor output. You're not restricting the current carrying capacity by having a thinner track, and as a result of that, the ESC should stay cooler. Now, as a result of this, Trappy has said that the official current carrying capacity of this ESC at 60 amp is very conservative, and they have loaded one to over 300 amps without any issues. Now, just looking at the ESC under a microscope, there is no question that the layout of this is all really quite clean and tidy. It's laid into 4 different areas, really. You've got this for motor 1, motor 2, motor 3 and motor 4. The FETs are all laid out really nice and clean and tidy in banks down the side. You've got your pads over there. Motor driver wise, you can see it is using the AT32 F421 MCU, and it's got the Fortier FD6288Qs. FET wise, the FETs are the QN3109's 35016Es, and that's really all there is to show you on this side of the board other than some passive components. What you will see though, if we do look at the mounting posts, you don't have pads going around them or traces or tracks. We'll have a look at that other ESC in a minute so you can see it under the microscope. Then if we just flip over to this side of the board, you can see there we've got our current shunt resistor to measure our current draw. We've then got our I/O componentry and filtering for the capacitor, and then really that's all there is to show you on this side of the board. With regards to the quality, again, everything looks really clean and tidy. No tombstoning, all the components right on their pads. It is as good as any of the other good ESCs that I have seen on the market. Now, about the only thing I will say on this ESC that I've spotted, having looked at it a little bit more, that I would like to have seen is castellation on the motor pads. At the moment, you can see there, as I've shown, you've got the FET going straight onto the pad. You can see there that there's little bumps on each pad, and that will go through to the pad on the other side there. It's quite hard to show you it at the moment. I've now got it in a frame. But what you can see is on the edge of the PCB that there's no castellation. What that is the copper being run up over the full lip, joining all of the top and the bottom pad together. Now, the reason I say this is, as this ESC has been designed to try and deliver the best possible capacity, you can't easily solder the wires onto the bottom pads with the Gorilla Mount like that there. As you can see there, it's going to be very close to the frame, so you're only ever going to be using the top of the pad, and that means you're having to bring that current through the PCB. There is most likely wires under those little pad holes that you can see there, or at least it will go through to layers in the board that will come up to the top. But castellation would have been really nice. That would have just sort of put the cherry on the cake with regards to the ESC. Now, just in case you don't know what castellation looks like, it is there on those pads there. You can see that it is plated all the way down the outside. On this ESC, you can see that there are wires that definitely go through, and then you've got the castellation on the outside, and you can even see it there on the main battery pads too. Now, just to show you on an ESC with the pad going around the post hole on the side here. Now, this isn't necessarily bad. This is very common practice. This is the SkyStars ESC, also AM32. There is no issues with this in my opinion overall, but what I did want to show you is what TBS are trying to avoid. You can see there, we've got our pad, and you can see the track is going around the motor post on either side. SkyStars have actually done a really good job on this ESC because it's actually a separated pad. You then have a ground point there from the post in the middle. So the pad for the ESC is not able to actually touch the mounting post. We have seen some other manufacturers do that and cause problems. This is sort of the best possible way of doing it, but it does just show you the compromise that TBS are trying to avoid. If you look at the current capacity on this pad here, it is on both sides of the board, but you can see it is much thinner there, much thinner around that top end as well, and that's really what TBS are trying to avoid. Now, just to show you that there are alternatives to doing what TBS have done, instead of going around the hole, what we have on this ESC is that the FET goes through into an internal layer in the board and then comes into the pad. If you look on that pad there, there's a track that goes straight to that FET. There is no track to this pad here. If I flip it over the other side, it's exactly the same. This is the FET that's driving it, that one there and that one there. And what they're doing instead is there's a pad on the end there that you can see that goes into an internal layer in the PCB that then comes to here. So that just shows that isn't the only way of doing it, going around the hole. You can deliver it internally. Now, before we move on to the frame, I just want to show you the mounting options, because whilst this is designed for gorilla mount frames, you can use it with standard frames as well with an adapter. Now, the configuration as you get it here is the flight controller, the center frame, and then the ESC. And really what you do is mount this center frame part to the ESC. That will then mount to either the frame or the other mounting adapter, which we'll take a look at in a minute, and then you mount your flight controller to the top frame piece there. Now, they include all of the screws with the kit, so there's nothing that you need to go out and buy, which is nice. You simply screw in the 4 to hold the flight controller. These bottom out to the right height, so you don't have to worry about them being too tight or anything like that. They squish down on the gummies just right, as you can see there. There's plenty of clearance around that bracket for the flight controller. And then what you would do is mount that there. I've got the 4 screws here which you can use for mounting through. I'm going to just put 2 in a minute just to get this together, just to give you an overview of how it looks. There you can see I've just put 2 screws in to hold it together, and then that is the stack. Now, obviously on the TBS frame you have the gorilla mounting posts, so it will go straight to it. However, if you do want to use this not on a gorilla mount frame, you can. You have the adapters which are available. They are £5, I think I paid for it in the UK. You get some screws, and there are 2 machined aluminium adapters. Interestingly, come in separate bags. I think we could probably save some baggage there if we wanted to. So then what you have is these gorilla mount conversion adapters that allow you to convert them back into 30 by 30 mounts. So to do this, what we will do is get the screws from the kit for this. So then what we need to do is just place our mount on top like that, and then use the included screws with the bracket kit, not the screws that came with the ESC originally. So if we just get them into the right place. So that's the first one. So there you can see it's all done. You've got your mounting bracket on the bottom. So if you did want to mount it into a standard frame, you can. You can see the clearance there to the bottom of the ESC. The only thing you are going to need to watch on this is when you do mount this onto your standard frame, that your screw doesn't go all the way through and touch the pad. There is a risk there of that. This is going to restrict your soldering of your wires to your bottom pads on the ESC, so you're going to want to put them onto the top. And what you're going to need to be just careful of is that you don't bottom out and touch the pad and short out that phase. Now, obviously, one big question will be around the stack height. When using it with these adapters, it's obviously going to add a bit, but we need to know what that is. So let's take a look. Let's go to the top of that screw there to the bottom of the mount. This is with the 30 by 30 mount. I would expect it to be the same with the 20 by 20. I don't know if you can easily see the display there. That's coming in at 1905. If I just put a bit of pressure on it, it goes to like 18 something. 19 mil with the brackets here. Now, I've also checked the height when using Gorilla Mount, and that comes in at 18 mil. So it's a 1 mil saving over using the brackets. So basically, there's a 1 mil penalty for using these brackets compared to the official mount, which is basically nothing. Now, before we look at it in the TBS frame, I thought I would show you it fitted into a very popular frame, which is the Mario 5. And actually, it fits absolutely fine. I've removed the long screws that come with it for the stack mount, and I've installed the screws TBS included. This frame does have press nuts built in, but it fits fine. There's no issues at all. Again, as I've said, you are going to need to make sure that your screws that go in do not go all the way through and touch the pads. But other than that, what this shows you is it fits absolutely fine in a standard frame. Whilst it does have this customized Gorilla mount, you don't have to use it, and you can use it in a standard mount setup. You just need to make sure that you have the adapters for your sizing. Now, one other thing just to note is that you will see that this ESC is a bit more compact in this frame than, say, a standard ESC like you've got here. This, with the rounder setup with the post holes in the traditional places, does push everything out a little bit. You can see that it does stick out more at the sides, whereas this is all a lot more compact. So again, it should offer some additional protection in the event of a crash. Okay, so now we should move on to the Source 1. Now, I'm not going to do this as a complete build guide like I would do in a frame-only review. There's a lot going on in this video, so what I'm going to do is quickly show you what you get, and then with the magic of television, as they say, I will snap my fingers and I will show you the frame. So, in the kit, we have a battery pad. It's not one of the super sticky pads, but it is a rubberized pad with 3M tape on the back. Nice to see. We've got our arms. We've got our top plate, bottom and mid plate with pre-pressed nuts, which is nice to see. We have our standoffs, bag of screws, and our front frame pieces, as well as what I guess is a center locking piece for the arms as well, which you can see there. If we just take a look at the thickness on some of these, so you do have an understanding. So let's get the arms out. Okay, so looking at the thicknesses, the arms are 6.14, so 6 mil. Sorry, you can't see this very easy on camera. The battery's going low on it. So that's the arm thickness. Top plate, 2 millimeters, 2.16, but that'll be 2. I think that's the bottom plate, and that's the mid plate, or that's the mid plate and that's the bottom plate, whichever way round we want to level this. That's 2.5 mil, and I think that's 2. It feels a bit thinner. Yeah, and then you'll have a 6 mil, 5.76 mil for the separator. As for how this goes together, I haven't looked at any instructions. I'm gonna wing it on this one. But my bets will be it is something along the lines of that. There. It will, but instead of me doing it like that, it will be something along the lines of the oh God, in the wrong place. there. I haven't got the nuts in, so I'm literally doing this by eye at the moment. You then toss that in the middle. I should have chucked that in first, actually, because that would make a good... there you go. So, if we put that like that, you then would mount your top point on there like that, which then gives us our full length. Then you go for your standoffs, and then your top frame. So, fairly nice and straightforward to assemble. So, what I'm going to do is do that, and with a flick, and like that, the frame is together. Now, as you can see, I've assembled it with shorter screws through the pre-installed nuts here to make sure that they're not sticking through. If you were going to use this with a traditional flight stack, you're going to need to use longer screws. I'm not seeing super long ones included with the kit, so you would need your own long screws if you were going to do that. However, today we're just going to use what comes with the frame for the Gorilla mount. Now you can see there are holes here, 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 and here. This all lines up with the Gorilla mount mounting like that there, but obviously you can't mount it just like that because it would go straight to the frame. With the kit, you did get some screws with some spacers. There's also some screws in the frame kit as well. I'm just trying to work out exactly which ones you use. One thing I will just note on the build of this, and I've just noticed it, to get to these back ones is pretty straightforward because you have holes there and there. However, these front ones are sort of sandwiched between the carbon, so you're either going to need to use longer screws to go through both, and they do have some very long ones in the kit, or you're going to want to put them in before you actually mount the top to the bottom plate, but I don't think that's the best way of doing it. So what we're going to do is do it this way here. So I'll get it mounted and then I'll show you how it looks. Okay, so there it is, TBS Lucid mounted on the Source One on Gorilla mount. Now, there are a couple of things I will note on this. You've got little standoffs that go on the front and the back of the ESC to stand it off from the frame so it doesn't touch. Just note that in the kit with the frame as well, there's some bigger standoffs. These actually go here between the bottom plate and the mid plate, and then you have the shorter standoff that goes between the mid plate and the ESC itself, but you do have the standoffs there and there, so do make sure you install them. We have the longest screws going through the front here and the shorter ones going through the back there, and then that gives us our main mount for this stack. Overall, it's really clean and tidy. Again, there's not really major upsides to using the Gorilla mount on this frame compared to the brackets, although you're saving a $5, so you don't want to waste a $5 if you don't want to. The great thing with this frame is you can use the Gorilla mount if you want to, but you could also use your traditional 20x20 or 30x30. They do say, obviously, you get the benefits on Gorilla mount, and it's not really specific to this frame. The benefits are that they've been able to lay out the ESC better for current carrying capacity, overall improvements in how they say it drives the motors. That will be the case, though, on whatever frame you use it on. What's really nice about the Source One is the fact that it does take the Gorilla mount without the adapter. Okay, so it's all built up. Now, just to show you around it, there's not a great deal to show you here. This is definitely a bare bones, more basic style frame. It doesn't come with all of the TPU bits that you get on others. It is an analog FPV frame in the sense of it has 19mm mount for the camera. That means you can fit normal analog FPV, you can fit Avatar HD, you can fit HD0. Unfortunately, though, I have tried it with the O3 camera and it will not go between these plates. Furthermore, I can't call this a digital ready frame, even though there might be space for O3 in the back. Because it doesn't have the vibration isolators for the camera mounts, I wouldn't class it as a digital ready FPV frame. That isn't to say you couldn't convert this to any of the other digital systems, or you couldn't convert it to O3 with some custom mounts at the front. I haven't checked. There might be options available out there for replacing these carbon fiber side plates with 3D printed ones that support O3. You could make your own, that's for sure, if you really wanted to put O3 in it. You do have some protection on the arms for the motors, so that's good to see. What I would say, though, is I think it will bend up if it starts getting a bit of bando bashing. Because it doesn't have these solid front ends like you see on some of the other frames like the Mario 5 here, you have standoffs. So you've got two there and then two at the back on each side. I think these type of frames do have a tendency that in a hard crash, you're going to sort of bend this all that way. It's not that it doesn't feel solid, it does, but I don't think it's going to stand up to a bashing as well as some of the others, especially with those solid aluminium front ends. However, that isn't to say it isn't a nice frame. It's a short frame, which I really like. It's not that long. I do like these frames that are shorter and taller. There's plenty of space in there. You'll have no problem getting your battery strap through there on top of your stack as well. You've got plenty of space to get your VTX in the back, your receiver, any other electronics you want to. So yeah, no major complaints at all. About the only complaint I would add is the camera mount at the front. It's a shame it doesn't take O3. Okay, so to share with you my thoughts on the TBS Lucid flight stack as well as the Source One flight controller. Before I do that though, let me get rid of my plate of humble pie that I've just had to eat. Now, TBS Lucid, we'll talk about the flight controller, then the ESC. Flight control wise, zero complaints. What's not to like? AT32, cheap, has all of the main I/O that you'll need, supports analog, supports digital. There's just no downsides here. Price-wise, it's a good price as well. The standard gyro version, or what they call the freestyle, if you want to go for the ICM gyro, $39.95. Or if you want that MPU 6000, you can pay that extra $10 more, $49.95. So it's great that they're giving you the option of both and allowing you to make the decision. With regards to the ESC, actually, it's very, very good. I get the design ethos behind it. It's very well laid out. Both the flight controller and the ESC are very well made as well. But let's be honest here. I have been extremely critical of the Gorilla mount in the past on this channel. My comments around it have been around the fact of I don't understand what problem they were trying to solve. I still today don't fundamentally believe there's an issue with a 30x30 or 20x20 mount. There is no question that TBS are trying to solve a problem, and that problem is the post holes getting in the way. I'm just not convinced still that it's a major problem that required solving, if that makes sense. But where I have to give them credit is that whilst they have created this new mount, it works very nicely in the frames that it's designed to be used in, but it does also work fine in frames that it's not designed to be used in. Yes, you do have to spend some more money on the brackets, and there is a little bit of a payoff in height as a result of that as well, because you've got a bracket between the ESC and the flight controller, and then you've got a bracket between the ESC and the frame. So you are losing a little bit of stack height as a result of it. But in the end, it is as easy to fit and as easy to put together as any other ESC flight controller combo out there. There are really very limited downsides to using the Gorilla mount on a standard frame mount, and what actually probably should be said is TBS should be congratulated for making an ESC that is custom but does support the traditional mounting system as well, so you're not forced into using a proprietary setup. There are options. The price of the ESC is very competitive for what you're getting, $54.95, but you do then have to bake in the additional cost of the brackets if you're going to put it in a standard frame. But there are some nice upsides to it. It is a narrower and longer ESC that keeps everything more on board, especially if it's a thinner style frame. About the only actual complaint I can lay against the ESC is what I mentioned earlier with the castellation of the pads. I would have liked to have seen that on all of the motor pads. With the bracket system, it does limit where you can put the wires underneath. You wouldn't usually solder underneath anyway, to be fair. But it just feels like you're wasting the pads on the bottom of the ESC completely. They may as well not be there, if I'm honest. You may as well just cover them over and only have the pads available on the top, whereas some castellation would have just, in my opinion, and this is purely opinion, it's not electrical technical fact that I've tested, but I would have preferred some castellation just to help with the current carrying capacity on those pads, having it plated all up on the outside. So when it comes to Lucid, I do need to eat a very large slice of humble pie, and frankly, I owe TBS an apology, and they have it. I am sorry. I made a mistake here. I should have probably checked this a bit more before shooting my mouth off quite as much as I did. But hey, that is who I am. There are times where I get things right, and there are times where I get things wrong. I still, as I've said, don't fundamentally agree that there was a problem that needed to be solved. But at the end of the day, what they haven't done here is caused more problems. And even when you add in all of the cost, it's still good value. So absolutely, I got this one wrong. Now, with regards to the Source One frame kit, I like it. No major complaints with the frame other than I don't feel it's the most robust or rigid of frames on the market. It's a great price point, but I also don't think it is the best frame out there for this money. I'll be honest, the SpeedyBee Mario 5 is a better choice in my opinion, but that isn't to say that this is a bad choice. It's just got a few limitations compared to the Mario. For instance, it's not easy to use with DJI 3. And you don't get all of the TPU bits, although you do have to take into account with the Mario 5, you are paying a bit more, and there are different versions of the frame because you've got the upgrade kits and stuff on it too. But it's certainly not a bad frame, that's for sure. And I think it's a very easy frame to put together. And TBS, again, are delivering a decent product at a very low price point. Now, one other thing I just want to mention on the frame is the fact that when I went to the TBS website to go and get the manual for this, the link appears to be dead. The link to both the manual and the 3D print download files for this frame is dead on the TBS website. Just to show you this, on the main page, if I scroll down, you've got info down here that says get involved. You've got interactive manual, it says work in progress, but when you click the link, it's dead. The link takes you to some web archive thing, which even if you remove that off the start of it, it just takes you to Google and it doesn't take you to the manual. If I go back, the situation is the same for the 3D prints as well. It's exactly the same. It's going to webarchive.org, although if I take that off and do that, we can then search that way to get it. And then we get some of the stuff coming up here. TBS Source One accessories. What it's not, though, coming up with, as far as I can tell, is like a list of stuff from TBS themselves. This all looks to be user-related predominantly from the look of it, which is fine. But it would be great to have sort of their file set there available as well. But there is a bunch of accessories and stuff available to download on the website here if you want to get it. Now, as I've said already, price-wise, the stacks are available from TBS for $89.95 for the freestyle version and then $99.95 for the pro version. They aren't in stock at the moment, but you may be able to get it from your local dealers. If you want to be able to get just the flight controllers, as I've said, $39.95 for the freestyle and $49.95 for the pro. And then when it comes to the ESC, you're talking $54.95 for the standard ESC, but do remember, you're going to pay $4. I said $5 earlier, it's £5 in the UK or $4 for the additional brackets. So you're still coming in at under $60 for a 6S high current ESC. And as I mentioned, I did get mine from Your FPV in the UK and they do have them in stock. So if you want to order them from the mainland over here, it's available there as well. So in the end, no major complaints. I'm more than happy to recommend these if you're interested in getting them. There will be a link to TBS's site in the description. There will be a link to where you can buy the Lucid flight controller and ESC as well as the frame kit as well. If you're interested in getting them in the UK, there will be a link to Your FPV, who I bought these from. They also sent me some other stuff as well. So thank you guys at Your FPV. You are amazing. And really, from me, I'm interested in knowing what you think about this. If you have any questions about this, please do let me know in the comments section. And finally, I'd just like to say, if you have found this video interesting and you'd like to support the channel, please do consider checking out the links to my Patreon as well as buying me a coffee. It is only through the support of my patrons am I able to keep making content on this channel. And if you'd like to support us to allow us to keep making content in the future, please do consider checking it out. I want to say a massive thank you to all of my Patreons. I would not be able to do this without your support. Anyway, that's it from me on this one. Stay safe. I will speak to you soon.